Hey, and welcome back to another episode of MHSNews Gaming. I'm Myles Edgington.
And I'm Bains.
We're talking about BioShock, which is an action-adventure horror game, basically.
So, where do we begin?
I guess let's start where it all began.
BioShock 1.
Oh, now you're in an underwater city that's known as Rapture.
Just as soon as you descend to the surface of the water, there's this giant wall of text that just says Rapture.
No, that was a great introduction to the
nice
game for me.
Right.
I will say the story and gameplay is pretty simple. I don't feel like it was boring because even though it is still this city, I feel like it provided a lot of unique areas.
Definitely.
BioShock, I feel like 1 and 2 are known for the you thought you were done. No, Mr. Andrew Ryan, he's from watching you and he's not very happy with you. Should you wonder what he's gonna do? He's gonna sick his goons on you, blow up the submarine, or just try to blow you up in general. Andrew Ryan kind of acts as the main antagonist for this game. What I found a very interesting B-plot is it kind of develops the growing tensions before kind of Rapture fell apart between Andrew Ryan and Frank Fontaine. And it makes you kind of wonder, what happened to Frank Fontaine?
The way you discover what happened is so natural. It just feels like you piece the story together yourself. Even though the game kind of spoon-fed you?
Atlas, this person, who's supposedly been helping you throughout this game, turns out to be the guy. I remember which made this so special. When I got to Andrew Ryan, I legitimately thought the game was over. But then, then I just hear Atlas start laughing, and I hear the accent change, and I'm like,
literally one of the most iconic moments in all of gaming. When you look back at everything that has happened up to that point in BioShock 1, it all clicks for you. And that moment is so memorable.
The game just gives you a slap in the face, you idiot, you didn't see all the subtle hint. What did you think about all the weapons and the plasmids?
So electrokinesis doesn't do much against them, so in terms of gameplay and pacing, it's cool.
Honestly, I completely disagree with that. For most of the game, I stuck with electrokinesis. That was my main strategy because this will be another shocker. BioShock 1, unless I was dealing with the higher level big daddies, always the pipe. So just shock them and then just
I personally just stopped with the shotgun and incinerate. I don't know, I just felt like that combo was perfect.
You had a variety of weapons, so you did kind of have to learn to adapt and maybe use all of them. Overall, how did you feel about BioShock's first installment?
Overall, I think the game shows its age, for sure. But as far as the story's actual structure goes, I think it's very, cookie cutter, in that sense.
Sure, the story and the gameplay may have been, somewhat basic, but I feel like that was the great part about BioShock for me.
It's true.
I think it's a good place to start for beginners. I think overall I'd give BioShock 1, a solid maybe 8.5.
I'd go with somewhere between a 7.5 and an 8 as well. Just it has BioShock 1's strengths, I think, are just the highest of highs, but then its lows aren't even all that low. I just feel like they're somewhat
the lows things could have been better, but it was still a very good game.
Absolutely.
Let's move on to BioShock's next installment, which I don't know about you, but this was personally my favorite one of the free games.
Same.
It definitely improved upon BioShock 1. The combat was a lot more advanced.
The level design was just way more expanded, which is cool because you get to see Rapture
even though
more.
it was like it's the same city, but we get to see so
many more sides of it. Yeah, it's so much more interesting.
Plot wise, like the best way I describe Bioshock 2 plot is custody battle, the video game. It's like, okay, so let me explain. So you're playing as a Big Daddy, which at this point most of them have, you know, just been decommissioned. The little sister, which kind of goes along with the Big Daddy, like they have a connection. You know, you start looking for her, and then of course, you know, the real biological mother is like, no, you're gonna die, you're going down, man. So basically, the main character, Delta, is going up against basically the entire city. Unlike Bioshock 1, like, I feel like Delta, more than anything, you really, like, start to connect with him.
It's such a more personal and just more intense story than Bioshock 1. It just, the way it, I guess, kind of envelops Rapture is kind of like a city of stories of, like, people. It's so much more interesting than, like, just the corporate hellhole that was in Bioshock 1.
And I think it's kind of fun that that a lot of people see Dr. Lamb as this religious figure.
Right. It's so, like, the way it melds, like, the, you know, society's obsession with money and, like, just status with the most basic principles of, like, Christianity is so interesting.
Honestly, do you want to know what I want to start with?
Absolutely.
Is the fact that this game we're playing as a Big Daddy instead of just a human, which makes the combat so much more fun, because instead of a wrench, do you want to know you have a drill and you can just go. You could just jab at people. It was so fun. And then if you want, you could just really start drilling into them. You can rush at people at huge speed and just punch them in the gut. Like,
and again, it's an interesting spin because in Bioshock 1, Big Daddies were seen as like this boss type character, but now you're playing as one. That's interesting.
Yeah, and I feel like putting in more enemies also did help balance out the combat, because of course you are a lot stronger in this game, so of course you can probably take on a lot more enemies. And what I liked was that the big sisters, like, you never knew when those were gonna pop up. And I remember the first time, like, when it just, you know, screen kind of flashes red a bit, there's a screech, and then I'm like, what the hell is that? And then I just see on the bottom of the screen a big sister's coming. And I'm like, I was just, like, Bioshock 2 and Bioshock 1, like, did manage to scare the crap out of me sometimes with just those moments. A lot of the time you just don't have a moment to rest, but I liked that about that game, because it was just like being this invincible metal man who's just taking down a whole city. You thought Andrew Ryan liked blowing stuff up? No, not even close. Dr. Lamb loves just blowing up parts of the city. Like, 3 separate times throughout the story, she tries to drown you by blowing up part of the city. Forgetting that, of course, you can breathe underwater.
But it's just funny. It's like a classic cartoon villain trope, where, like, they keep trying the same things over and over again. The definition of insanity. Whoa.
I think Bioshock 2, that definitely gets a 9.5.
Easy 9 from.
Still, like, overall, I really loved Bioshock 2.
Easily the best game.
Definitely the favorite one. It's unfortunate that we have to talk about the other one still. So, do we really want to talk about Infinite? Like,
I mean, journalistic integrity says yes, but my heart says no, dog. I mean, Infinite is just obviously a very contentious game, because, again, I think that it should not have been marketed as a direct sequel. It has very little to do with the other games.
First two games, you're underwater. This game, for some reason, they're like, you're in the sky. You're in the sky for some reason.
The game, near its end, tries so hard to relate back to the old Bioshock games by throwing like cheap references, cheap plot points at you, but it does not make any sense at all. The story is paced so poorly with the world hopping. And
personally, my least favorite part of the game, Elizabeth, which turns this game basically into escort mission the game. And, well, as we've said previously, nobody likes escort missions. Now, Booker is making the decisions. Literally everybody else except him is making the important decisions, and he just has to live with it.
When we look at the mid-game in Infinite, it is so disjointed.
Basically, this weird terrorist organization is basically forcing you to get weapons for them. But, of course, in your universe, the cops have killed the guy who makes the weapons. So you have to use the world hopping like 3 other times. And then, of course, this was the part where I was like, what was the point of that like 2-hour segment? Because then eventually you just get to a universe where they already have the weapons.
Infinite is big on ranged weapons, I think, more than any other Bioshock
Yeah,
game.
no, I really dislike that instead of being able to switch to the melee weapon, like you had to press an entirely like different button to do it.
But that goes against what Bioshock was about. It's about making your way through these like massive combat encounters through like the tools that you're familiar with. Like you said, electrokinesis in Bioshock 1 and 2, great, because you could use that essentially whenever you want. It was your kind of spin on the combat system.
Like, I mean, one thing, like, which I think could have been a fun feature, but again, then the combat segments ruined it, was the skylines. Those were, like, those were fun to kind of, like, swing around without the enemies, but then when they start incorporating those into battles, enemies would sometimes just hide up there and you'd have to go find them on the skylines, and
it just was not fun.
to substitute for making an actually challenging battle, they just threw a lot of Patriots at you. Which, especially in the final, like, segment where you're having to defend the ship from, like, waves of guys, that just didn't work. Because first of all, that segment just went out way too long.
Yeah.
And the fact that most of the time you were having to deal with 2 Patriots at once.
God, I hated that section with all my heart.
Okay, so we've kind of been spouting a lot of really negative stuff about Infinite. Well, I mean, I guess we could talk about, like, one of the positive things that we actually liked about the game. Looked really pretty.
Yeah, the graphics. This will be graphics in 2011. But no, Columbia was just really cool. Was it cooler than Rapture? Maybe not. But like just aesthetically, it's such a cool world.
What Bioshock was aiming towards, Columbia was like a little bit jarring. Since, you know, at first it didn't feel particularly like scary or like tense. But I feel like that made it even better when, as you progress through the game, the areas do kind of get slowly creepier. Creepier. Yeah, no, I feel like in the end, despite like that the world was very nice, I still gotta give it like 6. So like, just everything else fell flat on its face and the world just couldn't recover.
True. I would give Infinite a 5 just because I think it didn't land at all in what I was trying to do, but I think Columbia is just super cool. And also, I do like the gunplay. So 6 I think is fair.
I think overall with the Bioshock games we can say 1 and 2, definitely play those 2. You can always just like skip Infinite but like I would encourage I'd encourage you as the viewers to maybe just try it out. Maybe you'll be one of the ones who likes Infinite. Just, you know, we didn't
really
like
didn't,
Infinite.
no.
Yeah, but no, that's probably gonna be it for today's episode of MHS News Gaming. Like,
This has been MHS News, signing off.